So we've got about 300 slides to go through. There will be a brief intermission. Expect this to run about an hour and a half to 2 hours. No, so we, at the beginning of January, so at the turn of this year, I and the other 5 folks sitting up here made the trek around the world to go to Ghana, West Africa, to minister to some villages there and just spend some time with one of our mission partners, GlobeServe. And so we just wanted to kind of give a presentation on that. The presentation is nope, not yet. It's just going to roll behind us. So if you have any kind of questions, you can let us know throughout. You can wait till the end. So we're hoping that we'll have time for question and answer at the end as well. So Carter? So this was our arrival at the Tamale airport. And the lower picture there is the dream team. So I'm just going to give kind of an introduction of like the travel, actually getting from here to there, and some of the things that we experienced throughout that. So we started planning this, I don't know, October, September, something like that. Pretty early in the year. Got our flights, all of that was fine, with the exception of I threw a wrench in it because I went to Tanzania for a safari in November. So I did not get my visa at the same time as everyone. And we've heard a lot about Jonah recently. Bob actually spoke about Jonah in a men's breakfast. Jeff Roth spoke about Jonah. There's been a lot of that coming up, and I have to confess that as time drew kind of near for me to get my visa, I began to feel a little bit like Jonah in that I started thinking, if I don't get to go, that would be okay. And I got to go. That was not God's plan, in spite of kind of being fine with that and maybe even at times wishing for that. I did get everything. I did get all my paperwork in time and got to make the trip. And I'm very happy that I did. And I'm glad that that was what was kind of in the cards, so to speak. And one of the things that I think about as we went over there, as we went through all the air travel and everything, and as we landed, we've done 2 years running now the men's bake sale. And I always miss getting up here to kind of say how much we've made. But a couple years running now, we've raised, just in a bake sale, about $1,500 each time. And what I really started thinking about was how there's a provision for us. I started thinking about the Lord's Prayer, in fact, how our daily bread is provided for us. And I started thinking about all of those who have prepared that way, all of those who are back home thinking about us and praying about us as we're there, and all of those people that will come behind us. And it can just be very, very overwhelming to think of that. But I just want to say to this church family, it is amazing how when the call goes out, how everyone just shows up, how everyone gives, how everyone makes way for that provision for us as we travel. And another thing that I want to highlight before I sort of talk about sharing the gospel in my particular village was our bus ride. So we flew into Tamale and drove up to Wa. For kind of context, we looked, Ghana is about the size of Minnesota in land mass. And the drive from Tamale to Wa is 305 kilometers, or roughly 190 miles. It is a 6-hour bus ride. Our bus ride turned into like 11 and a half hours. Because as we started going down the road in our bus, we had to sort of stop, and when we would stop at the front of the bus, we had the bus driver and a lot of the GlobeServe people, and they would all basically hop up. The bus driver would open a panel, and he would start pouring water into the radiator because we were overheating pretty badly. So we started going through our water, started stopping more and more frequently, and it finally reached a point where I think we were stopping about every 5 minutes to put water in. And, you know, just the thought of that, like, getting over here was very easy. There's no problems. And then, like, what is this showing us? What is this teaching us as we're over here? And for me personally, that we weren't actually in control in any way. That our path was set, but that there would actually be times on this trip that we would have to trust in God, because we started running out of water 2 times, and we were nowhere close to anything. You cannot imagine the distance and the isolation when you're out there. There are just very, very small villages with almost nothing in between. There's no such thing as like an auto body shop, you know. So we started running out, and, you know, wound up finding a well on the side of the road. Had some very interesting suggestions. We wound up buying like a pack of cigarettes to throw in the radiator to try to stop it up. It turned out it wasn't a hole. It was more what would classify as like a fissure. The water was just basically gushing out of the bus. And we were pretty close to a village called Saula, which was a little bit of a larger town because it actually appears on Google Maps. And we were running out again. I mean, all we had was like just very little bit of our actual drinking water left. And I remember when we went flying by and someone saw a well, and like, oh. So we just hit the brakes, back up, were able to get more water, pulled into town and found some random folks and said, where can we get this fixed? And this guy just hops on the bus with us, and off we went and got it welded up. And as it turned out, that was really nice, because we got to spend about an hour and a half out of the bus, because the absolutely worst part of that trip was the last bit. That was the roughest road we'd been on. And but it just really, reflecting on that, made us think, made me personally think about how this was God's trip. And I think it was his way of showing me, at least, that that, you know, you think you probably have everything sorted, but you really don't. So I'll talk a little bit about my village, Paula, and I'll talk about sharing the gospel there. I shared some of this in the men's breakfast a few weeks ago, so I apologize if you've heard it, but here goes anyway. So when Sam was over here, we were at Kit and Stewart's house, sitting around, and he just casually mentions, he's looking at his phone, and he goes, oh, if you guys want to, you can do some teaching while you're over there. Okay, well, what is that? What does that entail? Well, you know, so we asked him, and, you know, do you have anything for us to teach? He said, no, you'd have to come up with everything yourself. Okay. Well, who would we be speaking to? Well, you'd be speaking to believers in these villages. You know, all these villages have believers, and you'd be speaking to them, you'd be encouraging them, you'd be sharing with them. But maybe prepare something for non-believers as well. So, okay, cool. We're kind of thinking we're going to separate and talk to these believers, and it's going to be us and them, and it's going to be really great and very easy, and we'll be able to encourage them. So we land, and Sam says, yeah, you're going to be speaking to the whole village, everyone, each time. We're going to separate the men and the children and the women, and you're going to be speaking to them directly. So we had to sort of shift gears and, you know, move into a place where we're going to share the actual gospel with them. And it's very interesting because you have no idea what anyone's background is in the Bible. You have no idea what they think about the creation of the earth. You have no idea what they think about God as a concept, as a, you know, or anything. So we kind of all took the same tact. We sort of started with a little bit of Genesis and talked about the creation of the earth, and then moved into who Jesus is, why Jesus is, why is this important, and just shared the gospel. I went after Ryan. He went the day before me and spoke for about 40 minutes. And I spoke for about 10 or less. I thought I had plenty. I literally wrote every single line out, because you've got a translator as well. And at the end, the last thing I said was like, if you would like to know more about Jesus, please let us know. All these murmurs started happening, and my translator was like, they want to know more. Like, they want to know more. And I was very unprepared for this. So thankfully, he's come up in the pictures. You'll see him again. There was a pastor with us, Pastor Muhammad, who did convert from Islam. He was there, and he was there to answer questions. And I turned and I said, Pastor Muhammad, would you like to take this? So he got up there and spoke for another 20 minutes or so, and 23 men accepted the Lord that day. And it was just really incredible. It was a great blessing, and was very unexpected. But it was a really great time. So again, that is it for my portion of this. If you have any questions, I would say probably feel free to stop us during this, or at the end, again, we're going to try to have some dedicated question and answer time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this chance to share with you guys. I was privileged to be a part of this wonderful, blessed experience of going to Ghana. But to begin with, I didn't even know if I was going to be able to go. And to be honest, I think all 6 of us went through that. You know, does God want us to go? And should we be going? And here's the situation. I really wanted to go. Halfway through the year, I lost my job. And I thought, well, that rules me out. I'm not going to go. Then, next thing happened was Josh couldn't get his passport back, so he was going to back out. Then winter was coming, and I'm sure Ryan didn't have your corn done yet, did you? So I'm sure he thought he shouldn't go. Close to Christmas, Kit's father became ill, and she said, I don't know if I can go. And then Sharon thought if she's going to be the only woman, she didn't want to go. And then 3 days before we left, Mike's brother had a heart attack. Well, anyway, despite these trials, God worked out so we could all go. And I think we really pissed Satan off. I don't think he wanted us to go, but he worked it out so we could. Then, the first day we were going to go to Hector Airport, then it was my turn again. I had a meltdown. Got to the airport, was all set to go. I'd bought this nice battery-operated loudspeaker because I wanted to make sure. I knew there was no electricity in these villages. We got to have a loudspeaker so they can hear us. So I packed it I got permission from the airport to take it with on the plane, and everything was great. And I was putting things away. I thought, uh-oh, where is my translation? I'd been working on this Chakali translation for the past year, and I guess I didn't have it with me. And Kit could tell something was wrong right away. She looked at my face. What's wrong? I told her. She prayed for me right away, and I thanked her. And then I went to the other end of the airport, and I said, well, I don't know if I should get on this plane. I think I'll just stay home. And after a while, I did a lot of disappearing during this trip. After a while, they sent Mike to look for me. They found me. And then I guess they sent Josh to look for me. And I guess they finally talked me into going on the plane. So I went. But on the way back, God gave me this wonderful idea. I thought, is there a way that I could get this translation to a fax machine, and maybe there's a fax machine in Africa that it could be faxed over there. I thought I had a great idea, but then God gives Josh an even better idea. Don't you hate that when God gives other people a better idea? He said, we can scan it and email it. So before I could say no, he was on the phone, got a hold of Amy, and go over and get Calvin's stuff and email it there. And by the time we get to Minneapolis, it was in Africa. I mean, amazing. So, of course, because of all this chaos, I didn't even care what happened to my bag. I just threw everything back in the wrong bag. So I went through security. I lost my shampoo, my toothpaste, my mouthwash, my antibacterial lotion, my razors. And the team stood right up and said, well, whatever you need, we can borrow. And I'll tell you this, Kit even offered to borrow me her shaver. Now, no other woman in this church has ever offered to let me borrow their shaver. That's what a mission trip does to you. So anyway, we got over there, and then on the way, I got to tell you this, it's part of the trip. I didn't even make it. We were in the air, and this was my first international flight. I'd only ever been on a little plane to Bismarck twice and on the Life Flight helicopter. I got on this big plane, and nobody explained turbulence to me. Now you're laughing, but I was scared because I was scared. It felt like our old Chevy black pickup and the axle was going to fall out and we were in the air and what's going to happen? And, I mean, everybody else looked, what's wrong? They were fine. I was nervous. Anyway, make a long story short, I prayed about it, and God gave me this wonderful thought. We were in a snowstorm over Labrador in northern Quebec. I thought, if we land, there'll be this nice soft pillow of snow to land in. So even if we crash, it's no big deal. So, yeah, and I'm serious, I prayed. And then the stewardess came and gave me a peach Bellini. After that, I calmed straight down. Okay, then I went to sleep. About 3 a.m., I woke up again, and the turbulence had started. And this time, I wasn't making it up, because the pilot got on the loudspeaker and said, "We are experiencing some strong winds. There will be some rough travel." And so I knew it wasn't made up. And I told the stewardess, "You go and pray for that pilot." Or tell the pilot I'm praying for him, I meant. Anyway, and then I looked on the flight simulator. We were over the southern tip of Greenland. I thought, great, we're over the snow again. But then it kept on, and we got into the Atlantic Ocean. And then I did exactly what Satan wanted me to do. I started worrying. Anyway, but then when we were over the ocean, I thought, well, if it happens, it happens, I'm prepared to die. And then God gave me this wonderful thought. Well, if we crash, this is going to make the news, and all there's 6 of us, so it'll be a big deal. We'd be featured. And I know it's a sad thing, but we'd probably have a group funeral at church here, and everybody in all these towns would come here and hear the gospel, and we'd get saved. They'd get saved. And then the second thought that occurred to me was this. I'd worked on this translation project, and I thought, well, that's going to be lost. I thought, no, because of my stupidity in forgetting that at home, they could still email it to Africa, and these people could get the Bible. So thank God for my stupidity, that Bible would still get there. Okay, now I'm going to get to my village. But this is how the Lord was working in my heart. Just these things, I thought they were such big obstacles, but God worked. I have 9 specific answers to prayer. The 2 I've mentioned, or the 3. The 4th was I really wanted to visit Ghana Institute of Linguistics. I was able to get there. It was a Friday. They were still on Christmas break. But I took a taxi from the Tamale Airport over to this place, and this is my another disappearing act from the team. And I just picked out a random taxi driver, and these people are looking at me like, you're going off with a foreign guy in a foreign country? Like, they thought, we'll never see you again. They waved to me. But anyway, I got over there, and we got into the campus, and the taxi driver goes, "Hi, Vivian." I found out the taxi driver's sister-in-law worked at at Ghana Institute of Linguistics, so I was safe. Anyway, she showed me, and on one of these slides is a big cabinet with about 60 Bibles, and those are all the languages in Ghana that have already been translated. And so there's only about 21 left that have not been translated. 11 of those are they're already in process, so there's only 10 left that haven't been started, and 4 of them are unwritten, and the language I was most interested in was Chakali, and that's one of them. So anyway, when we got to my village, the one that I wanted to go to, you heard about it on the blog. It was a 2.5-hour drive to go 15 or 40 miles. This was the day I'd been anticipating for a long time. I'm going to skip all this. What surprised me was the people were there sitting, waiting for us. I can't believe it, that we were like celebrities or royalty when we came to this town. They treated us so wonderful, and they were waiting, just like they were waiting to hear the gospel. Why hasn't somebody come to this village before? And, they just sat respectfully. There was like 300 children there, and so we got ready to, the children and the rest of the team went to do the medicine and the nets, and Francis did a very entertaining skit on, he was Mr. Mosquito, and what a mosquito does when he infects people. And anyway, then it was my turn, and I was supposed to speak. And the message that I wanted to give was on Genesis 11, on how come there's so many different languages in the world. And so I started to speak in the best way I could in this Chakali language, and then I had an interpreter there, but I don't even know if that interpreter was a Christian or knew anything about the Bible. So partway through the interpretation, I couldn't tell if the people were getting what I was saying. So I said, does anybody here know English? And I think in that whole village, there was maybe only 3 or 4 or 5 people that knew English, but one man volunteered, and he came up and he said, I'll help you the rest of the thing. So I switched to English, and then he translated it verbally into Chicali, and that went much better. And when we got done, basically, I had struggled because in this language, there's no known word for sin. There's no known word for the cross. So you have to use other phrases like being bad or a tall pole or something like that to make them understand the words you're saying. And anyway, after I got done, Sam concluded and restated our purpose for coming and encouraged them to be open to the gospel. And then he made a bold request. Can we have some of your land? And the elders and the chief consulted for a while, and they gave GlobeServe a nice chunk of land. It's a 1/6 of a hectare. I think it's about 132 foot square. And they just gave it to us because Sam wants to build a church there someday. And then, when I got done, I went to thank this man who was helping me interpret, asked him what his name was. He said, Daniel Kanganoo. I about dropped dead. I mean, this was the man that had helped Dr. Brindle produce that Chicali dictionary that I've been studying for the past year. I had no idea I would be meeting this man. And here, he was the one that helped me translate, and I just was so thrilled. And so I got a chance to talk to him afterwards, and
That's him, yes. That is.
yep, and he gave me some pointers. Translating is very, very complicated, but he said, looks like you have all the correct words, but the problem is there's so much slang and so much variation because Chicali is not even taught in their schools because they have no books in Chicali. It's an unwritten language. So they bring Dagari teachers in to teach the children. The men and women use Wali to trade with their neighbors. So there's gotten a mixture of these other languages in. There's not a pure Chicali language, which makes translating difficult. But he says, the framework is there but the thing is, we only had 15 or 30 minutes there, and you can't translate in only that little bit of time. But if I had more time, we could have gotten a lot more done. Anyway, the last thing that I was going to share with was, there's also in this town a little clinic and then the schools. And I looked at the clinic, and it was really, really sad. There was hardly any supplies there, really, really sparse. And I talked to the midwife who works there, and he said they have about 60 births per year there, which is more than 1 a week that they're having babies over there. And, it's this dirty, cramped little waiting room and a little exam room, and this is where these women are giving birth. This is where the emergencies take place, and how sad. And it's 40 miles on this rough road to the nearest hospital. So there's a real need. If anybody was a nurse or wants to do that, I mean, there's all kinds of things we need. They need teachers, doctors, businesses, jobs, transportation, electricity, all this, toilets, septic system, water. So besides sharing the gospel, if there's anything else you can do, the need is wide open. And then I want to tell you a story about the next village, Zanko, that I went to. There I met a boy named Sandine. And I thought that was, and the reason I picked out in each village, I found 1 or 2 people that could speak English. So I listened to his story, and he is a young boy. He has a large family. He's got, I think, 10 brothers and sisters with his mom and dad have 10 kids, and then his dad and his dad's junior wife has 6 more kids, so there's like 16 kids. And he's doing everything he can. He rides his bike or something to the nearest town, and he got a little job at a t-shirt printing shop, and he calls his boss the master. And kids there, when you get a job, you don't get paid for the first like 6 months. You're there learning things, and all he can do at the end of the day, he gets a little item from the shop, and then he has to go and barter that to get food and take it home. But anyway, the thing that I got to share with him, I said, I realized he was Muslim, and he goes, I'm not supposed to be here. My parents told me not to come today. But I snuck out anyway, because I've heard a lot about this, because he has Christian friends in school. So I told him about Jesus, and I told him about the Bible, and he goes, I really want to know more. And so we had some Bibles with, but we couldn't give Bibles. I had to sneak them out to the back of the bus and hand it to them privately, because if you give one thing to one person, everybody wants one, and we didn't have enough. So I told them, you take this New Testament home, and in the front it tells you how to become a Christian. I said, you hide it in your mosquito net. Don't let your parents see it. Take it out at night and read it, and make sure nobody steals it from you. And he promised to do that, and I've got his phone number here, and when he's read it, he's going to call or text me. So pray for him. Then second to the last day, we went to Domagile, and there I got a chance to speak again. And this time I taught on the subject, don't harden your hearts against the Lord. And like I say, we didn't know what kind of a village it was, but it was, I think, very highly Muslim. And when I started to teach, I heard some heckling in back of me, and it was a man trying to stop and disrupt what we were doing. And Lawrence had to take him aside while I kept on talking. And then I turned it into more of a dialogue with this group, and through the interpreter, and I said, tell me about yourself. I said, do you love your children? I asked the men, or do you hate your children? And, oh yeah, they nodded, they love their children. I said, well, do you always treat them fairly? And, well, that's kind of hard, because sometimes you try your best, is the answer I got back through the interpreter. And I said, well, God loves us, and he wants to treat us fair. And he's made rules for us, and if we obey him, life will go good. And I told him the story of the Pharaoh in Egypt, and how when Pharaoh hardened his heart, it became very, very hard. So I told these Muslim men, don't be like Pharaoh and harden your hearts. And I said, can you promise me one thing? And first of all, I kind of asked them, do you have, and I asked them their children, how many children you had. A lot of them had 5 kids, some had 10, and I kept going. So one had 12, one had 15, and one had 18 children. And so I told them, I want you to listen to this message, but can you promise me one thing? Your wives and your children are over there, the other women were teaching them. I said, if they decide to follow Jesus, can you promise me that you will not punish them? And I was waiting for a response. I didn't get anybody to raise their hands, but some of them kind of said, yep, we won't punish our wives. And I said, that's fine. Thank you for not punishing them if they decide to believe in Jesus. And then also I said to them, and I just want you to know that life will go so much better, and please don't decide already that I'm going to be a Muslim the rest of my life and I refuse to believe in Jesus. Keep that possibility open. So just keep praying for that village also. And I think that's enough for me.
All right. I wanted to share a few different things. So I want to back up a little bit. Calvin's pretty humble. So what he didn't tell you is that the Chakali people in Ghana are one of the unreached people groups. And the only reason we went there is because Calvin had a heart for them and wanted to go to them. And so that people group had been on Sam's radar, but he definitely had no plans to go there in 2020. But Calvin requested that we could meet some Chakali people, and so it was through that Sam then accelerated his plans, and that we went to that village. And so that's really impactful, and that was one of the neatest things I thought, was that that God allowed us to be a part of reaching this unreached people group. That there were a few Christians in the whole people group, but not hardly any, for all intents and purposes.
4 or 5 in that village.
Yeah, and this was a large village of 1,500 people. So God used Calvin's heart for that people to bring us there, and then through that, like he said, they gave land to GlobeServe, and there were a couple of young students, not young students who had graduated from missionary training school through Sam's school, that were also feeling called to the Chakali people, and so now there's land there for them. So these missionaries have a wide open door. There will be no resistance to them because the community had already accepted GlobeServe. So that was something that was really meaningful. So as we went to these villages, we would go into the village. There'd be a greeting time, and the whole village would come in. They would introduce us. The GlobeServe people would speak for a little bit, and then we would split up, and some of us would work with the kids, and some with the adults. We would hand out deworming medication, gospel bracelets, sing some songs with them. We taught them Jesus Loves Me in most of the villages, and then the adults would get mosquito nets. And that's where Calvin was saying that they did a little skit to show them what a mosquito does, because part of this is educating them. They don't really understand malaria. They don't understand why they get it and how they can prevent it. So we teach them that and why they should use their mosquito nets, and then in hopes that they will actually do that and use them. So we'd go to the villages, do that, and then break out into, like Josh was talking about, the women would break out and either Sharon or Kit would teach them, and the men and youth would break out to another group, and one of us men would teach them. So the Chicali village Ducey was the first day, and then the second day we went to Zonko. I don't have much to share about the village specifically, other than the first day in the Chicali village, because it was an unreached people group and they didn't have any sort of church context or organization, it was a little crazy, and it was also huge. It was about 1,500 people in that village, which is just massive. So we had, I believe it was 330 kids that we worked with in a very small space and not all that organized, and so it was crazy. But it was good because we knew that this was their first contact with the gospel, and so it was great. Then we got to the other 5 villages actually had churches in them, so there was some core of believers there. And so we got to the second one, and it was just kind of like a breath of fresh air, just in the practical sense of we could relax a little bit, and it wasn't so chaotic. So that was really nice, coming off the first village, just two different things. And then, like Josh was saying, we taught, which was, to me, the biggest difference between 2 years ago and this time was that teaching. We were not sure what we were supposed to do and what we should teach about, and we were all kind of wondering, what is the Spirit wanting us to say? And so that was kind of a challenge. But it was really neat to connect with the people and to actually be able to present the gospel to them. And that was, for me, the most meaningful part of it, is that we actually got to present the gospel to them, and just to see people accepting Christ in most of the villages, half the villages, something like that. It was an incredible experience. All right, so in Zonko, Kit and I were teaching. Interestingly enough, I don't know if this was just how God wanted it or what, but after the fact, both of us realized that we had presented the gospel, but we'd never actually given it an invitation, and we kind of had regrets about that, but which is funny because we weren't teaching together. I mean, we were completely separate, and that happened to both of us, and so we're just trusting that God is doing what he wants to there. There is an elder in that community, and so it's not like they don't have any contact anymore. So we're just trusting that God will work in people's hearts, and that given the opportunity that they'll choose to follow him, or maybe they have already. So that was, just continue to pray that the message that they heard when we were there will be reinforced by the people around them, and that people will continue to turn to him. Something, just watching the news and reading about things over in that area of the country, Ghana is a wide open door right now, and the gospel is fairly freely accepted, and there is persecution, but not to a great extent. But you kind of start to hear in the news about ISIS coming in and killing Christians, and if you look at maps and see where that is, it's getting very close. Couple hundred miles at most, probably closer than that, to the northern or northeastern border of Ghana. And so I've been praying, and I would encourage you guys to pray that God would continue to use Sam, and that this open door would be a great opportunity, because it may not always be like that. Persecution may come, and it might get more difficult. But as for now, the spread of the gospel in Ghana is truly an incredible thing. It's just neat to be able to be a part of that. So that's about all I have. But one more thing before we end, I'm going to just grab this other mic here. And then Michael, if you could come up here. Michael's next anyway, but he doesn't have any clue what I'm doing. So one of the just fun things in the evening that we would do, and some of you are aware of this because you followed our YouTube channels, we would do a Michael's Minute. And what you may not know is that those were not prepared at all, and Michael had no idea what was coming. And so I just want to replicate that right now. And so, Michael, in a minute or less, could you please tell us about the food in Ghana?
The food in Ghana. Yes. Well, at the beginning of the day, it was oatmeal for me every day. Yes, and there was also egg omelets, which was very good. And but they don't use sugar over there. They don't have milk, so they have very fluid oatmeal. And they have honey. It's a very strong honey, so one doesn't need much of it. And then for noon meal, often we were out riding on the bus, and Jan Hild would make sandwiches in the bus, and or hard-boiled eggs and bananas. And then supper. Yes, every night it would be rice and chicken, or chicken and rice, and done in various forms, and quite spiced up. Yes, lots of chicken, lots of rice.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay.
So you can just stay up here because I'm essentially done. But if you haven't checked those out, there's a YouTube channel, Eagle Valley Ghana Team, I believe. And there are more of those Michael's Minutes on there. Since not everyone is here this morning, I will attempt to post that Michael's Minute just as our final one, and you can check that out. But that was just a little fun we had, and hopefully those of you that got to watch them enjoyed that, because we all love hearing from Michael.
Well, he caught me off guard every single time. Day number 4, we went out to the area called Dara Barting, and it was probably about 30 miles from the town of Wa, where we stayed. And we turned off the hard surface road, went about 4 miles down a dirt path, more or less. And I'm surprised that the bus driver really wished to even drive down some of those paths, because we'd be scraping against brush and trees with that bus. He did a very good job of handling it. And whenever we came to those areas, and they weren't always villages, they're more or less community. There are no stores, no shops, houses probably every few hundred feet apart, with little fields in between of corn or yams, and there would be cows and chickens running around in between. But we knew where the center of that area was, because there'd be a huge shade tree with a bunch of plastic stack chairs. That's very common over there, and also benches. And as we drove up to this area, there was a man walking with about an 8-foot long bench just balanced up on the top of his head, and he didn't even have to hold it. So he got there, and then he took the bench off of his head and put that under the shade tree, and made more seating available for more people. Well, in this village, there is a church building, and we did go over to the church building after our session with them, and it was a block building with metal roof, only about 2 windows and 2 doors, and I think probably gets very warm in there. No pews, no chairs, no lectern, just a completely empty building. But they do hold services in there. Well, it was my turn to speak that day, and I'd been quite apprehensive about doing that, but we'd speak to an interpreter, and he'd say it in the village's language. And I told him about the greatness of God, about how God had created the heavens and the earth and everything that there is by just speaking it into existence. And then I went on to speak how God came back to earth in the form of a human, and how he became our Savior and how he went about dying for us. And I told the various miracles he had done, and I said the terrific miracle was how he had died and come back to life. He defeated death. And it was when Sam had given us that assignment of giving a speech or a sermon, I was uncomfortable with that, but in looking back, I think it was just a wonderful experience to do that. And I found how kind and understanding all these people were in the village. And then when we got done with that village, they gave us some few yams and also a goat. In fact, we were given a goat, I think, on 3 or 4 different occasions. Once also a sheep, sometimes guinea fowl, as well as yams. And because I was the oldest, or this is a farming community, and of our group, I was the oldest farmer, and they do respect elderly people. They called me Papa Michael. They gave me that name, Papa Michael. So they called me up and says, here's a gift for you. And they gave me that goat. And somebody asked me afterwards, did you bring the goat back with you? No, I said the bus driver took off with it. I says, come to think of it, that driver, he got my goat. And so that's where that went. It was all a wonderful experience.
I think what I want to share to start with is a verse from the Bible, because I think this is what I really learned on this trip was, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And skipping down to verse 18 in Ephesians 6, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit. This was huge for me, as Josh shared at the very beginning, just the doubts of whether he should even go. I knew that I should go, but when I got there, I felt such an inadequacy for the task. I thought, why am I here? What do I have to offer? I'd look at all my team members and think, these guys all are so gifted and they have so much to give. What do I have? And I felt so unprepared, and I shared that with the group one morning. And, the response was just so, we had no idea, and they prayed for me. And it was a great experience, and you realize how important the body of Christ is to each other, and how we are to pray for one another and just to hold each other up. I was also very unprepared for teaching. I had one verse when I got over there, and Sam tells us, well, you should plan on teaching for half an hour. And I thought, well, I have Psalm 19, the beginning verses, the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. That was it. And so I had also shared that with the team. And Kit said, well, I will go back to my motel room and I'll pray for you. And so she did. And I went back to my room and I said, Lord, I have one verse. And so I just thought, I'm going to start writing this verse. I wrote that verse, and God gave me 4 pages. And he is so faithful. And so I thought, great. So the first village I taught at was, what village did Paula? And it was a wonderful village, and they were so receptive, and there was all kinds of amen, and they were clapping their hands, and boy, you just felt so encouraged. It was a wonderful experience. And the second village I taught at, well, I knew the day before I just was feeling that God did not want me to teach on the same thing. And I thought, oh, great. I went through all this before, all the prep work. I thought, this is it. I'm good to go now for the rest of the week. I have it all down. Until he said, no, that's not what I want you to teach on. So it was back to Kit praying for me and me going back to my room and, Lord, okay, what is it? And lo and behold, he gives me Romans 12. And so at that village, which was Domagilly, and the whole atmosphere of that village was so different. It was just a heaviness. As soon as we got there, the reception was not like it had been in the other villages where they would come out dancing or singing. It was very subdued. And God knew what he was doing when he gave me Romans 12, because it was, there's talks in Romans 12 about the spiritual gifts, but also about using our gifts for each other. And I sensed very much a selfishness in that village. We still really do not know what was going on in that village. We don't know. We just don't know. But I believe there was spiritual battles going on, definitely there. But in that village, I was able to teach, and I actually did kind of give a sort of an altar call after sharing the gospel, and many women raised their hands, and so it was very encouraging. So that part of that village was that was amazing. You just see that. No matter what we're doing, the inadequacies that we feel, God is at work, and he is in the business of delivering people and saving souls. And I had an opportunity to go around and meet the women after the teaching time, and had the opportunity to pray with some women. There was an older woman there who was blind, who wanted me to pray for her, and I really prayed, believing that God could restore her sight. It did not happen while I was there, but he still could do it, and I still pray for her. And I have not looked at my notes here at all. I have no idea what I was going to say, but that's kind of how I was over there, too. I'm one for just kind of winging it. So there were just a couple things. These weren't in the villages that I'm supposed to be speaking about, but a couple things I wanted to share. I'm in the Chicali village, which was the very first village that we went to. There was a woman who came up to me, and she was so excited, and she was dancing around. She had her hands up in the air, and she kept repeating something over and over, which, of course, I had no idea what she was saying. And so I finally found somebody that was able to translate and tell me what she was saying. And she was saying, "You came to my village today. You came to my village today." And she was so animated about it. And I thought, it's just amazing. I really believe her heart was open. She was open to receiving us, and I believe she was open to receiving the Word of God. So that was a highlight. And the other highlight was in the village where the 23 men came to Christ. There was a man who was there, the one playing the cowbells, when we got there. And I happened to be done with my teaching and came back about the time that those 23 men, had come forward to receive Christ and were being prayed for. And I looked at this man, and I could see him. It was like watching somebody being born again right in front of you. And the change in this man, you could just see it. And he was so filled with joy and peace and love, and I've just never witnessed that just right in front of my eyes, such a transformation in somebody. And if I were to pick a highlight, I think that would be the highlight of the whole trip for me was seeing God save a person and somebody being born again. So I guess that's it. I really thank you for the privilege of being able to go, for all that you have done, this church, in supporting us and praying for us, because prayer was a huge, huge part. And it was very evident when we were there that people were praying for us. So thank you.
Well, I know that each and every one of the team was chosen by God. We never felt like it until we got there. But it's one of those things that you have those doubts. Every time I was to teach, every night I'd wrestle. I'd say, what am I doing? Same thing Sharon did. And I knew how much she needed prayer, because I needed prayer those nights before I was to teach. And I'd lay there every night thinking, what am I doing? I am not any good at this. This is not my thing. Lord, what am I doing here? And every day when I'd go to teach, I'd say something that I didn't know where it came from. And I didn't change my talk that much, I didn't think, until I was over. But God gave me some words that I didn't know. Like I said, I don't know where they came from. But I taught mostly on the book of John. I went through who Jesus was. And I added some other passages in there. But the women just responded so well. Oh, when you asked them at the end if they knew Jesus, they just, they'd raise their hands. They'd say amen when you were doing things, and I didn't know why they were saying it. There was many, many things that happened that I can't explain, but it was a wonderful experience. And the experience of teaching, I would say, scared the liver out of me. It still does. But each time we did it, we drew closer and closer to God. And we grew closer and closer to the women, because the women just loved on us afterwards. There was one Muslim lady in the last village I was at. She just wouldn't let me go. The people that accepted the Lord in that afternoon, I don't know how many there were, because she just gave me a hug so long that I couldn't count. So it's one of those things that I have never seen before, and I've never been a part of before. So it's well worth just letting God take control, because that's what you have to do, because you sure can't do these things on your own. I'm going to talk a little bit about Oleti, was the last village. Oh, it was wonderful. It was Sharon had the village before, and it was a little dark and a little different than any village we'd been in. They'd had a church for 5 years in that church where she was. And I didn't understand how come we felt this heaviness. But the people didn't come out and sing and dance when we came. They weren't prepared. They were carrying benches over. It's like they didn't know we were coming. The elders didn't come, things like that. So the next village was Oleti, and the last one. It was such a joy. The people danced their way out and sing and praising the Lord. They were praising the Lord. I asked what some of these songs meant, and they said, oh, they're just rejoicing that Jesus is coming again. He's coming again. Because you don't know what they're singing. They could be singing rock songs for all I know. But so we got there, and we get to sit in our blue chairs, like everybody said. We sit like this in front of everybody, and you feel like, oh, they're going to stare at us all the time. And I should get used to it, because that's what happened the time before. But we are special. And these people never see anybody hardly out of their village. They may go to town once in a while, but they don't see people come and care for them. And yes, a lot of them have pastors. Like Pastor Lawrence had 34 churches that he looked after. And he was a great man of God, but he couldn't be in all those churches all the time. And there's a pastor in most of these churches, or I should say a missionary church planter, because they aren't full-fledged pastors, most of them that are in the villages, but they're studying to be, a lot of them. So when we get there and they're singing and dancing, we just got lit up that day because it was a fun day. And they tried to teach us to dance. Michael and Josh, this is their dance. I tried to shake it a little more, but I'm too old, things rattled. But we just had a wonderful time. And it was just fun to be there. The kids behaved beautifully. They stood in their lines. They took their medicine. They went off and didn't bother us after they got the medicine, because a lot of times the kids would sneak around and get in line again because they wanted one of these. This was a treat for everybody, these bracelets. In fact, the white glows in the dark, and we had to warn them because they might get scared if they woke up in the night and saw their white bracelet glowing in the dark. So, it was just a very, very nice village. And we got our we got goats there. In fact, if we'd have come home, we'd have had to buy passage for a goat and 2 sheep, 3 guinea fowl, and a whole great big bunch of yams, and they're about this long and this big around. And for these people to give us that kind of a present when they have nothing, it is amazing. Just really, really amazing. Because a sheep over there probably would $50 American, and where they would get $50, I don't know. So we were just really, really blessed by them. And they don't understand that we can't take them on a plane. They don't understand a lot of things about the world because they're so isolated. I'll tell you a little bit about the church that we built over there. The church we built in Wa is one of those that's out there on the picture. I think it's the first blue one, isn't it? The money that came from you people built that church, and it was beautiful. It's featured in this. Sam asked me to say a few words to the people, and Michael's Papa Michael, well, I'm Mama Kit. And that's because we're old. It has no bearing on anything else, right, Mike? We're just old, and they really respect the elderly over there. But anyway, they asked Mama Kit to come and say some things, and I did. And I said, our church in America is not perfect either, and we need your prayers. And you should have heard them pray for us. My word. They prayed and prayed and prayed, and they're still praying, I believe, for us. So know that there's a church in Wa that's praying for us. Also, the people walked for quite a while to get to that church. I think about 18 miles were the furthest. And they'd come on Sunday morning in their beautiful clothes. And that's something that I just miss so much is the color. The color over there is just phenomenal. Everywhere you look, there's a bright dress or a bright pair of pants. I mean, the guys wear these things too. See that picture up there? That's me with little Esther. That little girl in the last village. She just walked across the circle, came and sat in my lap. Why? I don't know. It was a God thing. God must have told her to come and see me. Sharon and I immediately noticed this arm, her right arm, it just hung. And she couldn't, if she wanted it to be in a different position, she had to go like this. So we immediately prayed for her and prayed that God would heal that arm, because in that situation over there, that's a tough one to not have use of your limbs. You got to work hard. Many of these girls start really, really young, 4 or 5 years old, carrying stuff on their heads. And another thing about the village in Oleti, we had given them a well 2 years ago. That well didn't work when we got there. And they mentioned that they really wanted their well to work because their girls had to get up at 3:30 in the morning, walk to where they could get water, carry the water back to the village, and they'd get back at 11:30 in the morning. So you know what a long trip that was for those girls every day. They missed school, and that was their job. They had to go get water. And you can imagine how much water these people need. They need water to drink, water to cook with. I don't know how they kept their cattle watered. They couldn't. I just never figured that one out. But anyway, I was talking about Esther. And so after we got up and got our goats, Mike and I, and we gave her to Sharon to take while I had to go receive the gifts. And little Esther was sitting in our lap. That wasn't her real name, her African name. Then after we'd left the circle, her mother and grandmother came up to us and said, "We want her to have a Christian name. We want her to be known as a Christian name." And Josh pipes up, "Esther!" So there we called her Esther. So now we have a little Esther over there that we need to pray for, that God would heal that arm so it will work again. Also, I just wanted to say a couple things about the mission school. We went there before we went out on the villages, out to the villages. We were there Saturday. And it's one of the slides up here. You'll see a blue building with some white pillars. That's the mission school, where they teach the pastor missionaries that go out, and they usually teach about 13 of them at a year. So they try and send those out. There's a lot of them that need support. So if anybody wants to support one, they can certainly take and adopt one. Our book needs to be updated because some of those are not, have been taken, and there's a lot of more new ones. Sam has some goals. He wants to start 70 more churches. He wants to reach 10 more unreached people groups. And he wants to be able to take the Jesus film to 20,000 people. And he wants to train 15 new missionary church planters this year. Also, I said, these missionary church planters, there's 22 of them that need some support. They need 15 motorbikes. And while we were at this missionary school, and it's the headquarters in Tamale, while we were there, we gave a bike to our pastor that our church here supports. His name is either Johnson Takibon or Takibon Johnson, but they all call him Johnson, and I like that. It's easier. Anyway, and you saw the picture of him probably up here. I think I'm standing by him. And that picture, they leave the bubble wrap on their motorcycles because it keeps them shiny and new. And they don't take it off for a long time. I just I wanted to rip off the bubble wrap and see what it all looked like, but no, that isn't the way they do it. So that's a real badge of honor to have a new motorcycle. And it'll help him greatly in his work, because he's got 30, 40 miles to travel between his churches. And his churches are in Togo. And his family helps support him by farming. And he goes out and does this missionary church planting. And now he has a bike to do it on, so he'll be able to do it much more efficiently. And I'd like to thank every one of you for all the support, especially for the prayer support. You know, I used to think, oh man, these missionaries come and they ask for prayer. They would need money more than prayer, wouldn't they? No, you need the prayer support. That is the most vital thing that you can give a missionary, is prayer support. So with that, you're gonna come up and ask questions. I'll let Josh handle that.
Well, thank you. We will open up to questions. I know we got a meal, so we might not get a ton of questions. Again, this is the church in Wa that you're seeing now. This is the church that we built. And then a couple slides before that, you saw the actual missionary school, and then Johnson with his motorcycle. I will just mention very quickly kind of about the program that we would do that was kind of hinted at a little bit. But a lot of these villages, they go a very long time in between having people come. And again, I will stress about the Chicali people, which is a really special thing to be part of, that we were the first that ministered to them in that village. We were the first missionaries. You know, Lawrence came to the village to seek permission to come there, but literally Calvin is like the first person that shared the gospel in that village, which is incredible in my opinion. And that's actually Ducey right there with all the kids and everything. But we give this deworming medicine because they have to go and get very, very filthy water. There's not a lot of shoes, so they're always walking around, they always get worms, and that can be pretty detrimental. So that's why we go and we do kind of a medical outreach. They do the training on malaria, they do the mosquito nets, and we do the worming medicine, which is like a quarter a dose. It's insane. It's just very, very cheap to treat a child or an adult for 6-8 months. But anyway, I will open it up to questions. Dylan, you got one? It is repaired now. Yep. So Michael actually just said, fix it, get it done. And Sam got it done. I meant to, that's one picture I realized I forgot to pull off my phone to include here. But it is fixed, and Sam has been there and has had water out of that. If you don't get a mic, I'll repeat your question as well. So if we don't, so Eldon doesn't have to run all over. Yes?
When you were given a goat or a sheep or whatever you were given, and you couldn't take back money or they with you, what did you do to
Yes.
disperse of that animal? Because it's disrespectful to say I can't accept it. So how did you handle
Yep.
that?
Effectively, what happened to the livestock? So the guinea fowl came back, and actually once or twice the guinea fowl became supper for the Globe Serve people that were there. All of the hooved livestock wound up going either with Lawrence or someone else there in Wa. And then all the yams, there were a couple times we cooked the yams and had that as well, but I mean, man, we had a lot. The yams, I mean, Kid is correct. They look like firewood. They look like a log more than anything. So that was the fate of the animals. Calvin, you want to take that? Lefsa? You got a mic there if you want. There are pictures of that, a couple of them.
Yeah, they loved it. They loved it. Of course, I didn't have enough for everybody, so it was only for the chief and the elders, but it was sweet, they said. They're not used to sugar.
This would be a question, but something I'd like to share. I was in one of the first weeks in Ghana, and Pastor Darrell was teaching in the Bible school. Do I need that?
Sure.
And I learned that some of the people walked for 2 days to get there. And we came home, and would you believe, Leroy Betts had a garage full of bicycles. And he donated, I don't remember, 10 or 12 bikes that we actually sent to Ghana for pastors to be able to get around with. So I would just say thank you to Leroy again, and I'm sure that other people don't know that, but there was a church in Iowa that was sending a tractor and some stuff for that 40-acre plot that they had. And one of our people took the bikes down there and a lot of clothes and Sam was so excited when they came.
Very good. Anyone else? Anything? And no question is off the table.
After the gospel and the message of salvation, what are their needs? What are their physical needs by your estimation?
Yeah, so basically, what are their actual material physical needs over there? It varies. So in the north, Pastor Francis, so there's kind of two segments to it. There's like an Accra group and then the group in Tamale and Wa that cover the north. Wells are one thing. There's probably a list of about 30 wells between the two areas that are in queue for villages to get water. So that's going to be like a very, very primary thing. And then Sam is pushing for church buildings. I asked Lawrence, who said he was my twin brother. If you ever see a picture of him, you'll kind of see why. We always wore a hat and had facial hair, so he said he was my twin. To him, water is the biggest thing in the north. But I asked, okay, well, Sam is pushing for church buildings. Why? And there can be a myriad of reasons that people won't come to church. When it is the rainy season, they won't show up because you meet under a tree. They said if the wind is blowing too hard, they won't want to meet outside. And if you either have intellectuals or Muslims in the village that want to come, they won't go out in public to go and worship and go to church. So if you have a church building, that can help out a lot. But there's a lot of physical needs as well in terms of water is probably the biggest thing, because kind of the knock-on effect of having clean water in these villages is additional schooling for girls who otherwise just can't go to school because it falls to them to go do the trek to get the water. And then if you have a source of clean water, overall health can improve as well from that.
You're also informed that lunch is ready, so you can say a prayer of grace for lunch and then people socialize in.
Sure.
Any other questions?
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. Father God, thank you so much for this church body, for sending us to Africa, for allowing us to go there and be safe. Just pray blessing over lunch and the fellowship that we're about to have, and thank you for everything. Amen.